Hello and welcome to the Deep Sea Podcast, Pressurised, a short, punchy version of our main feed that gets right to the scientific point. If you like what you hear and you'd like to hear the full episode, you can find it in the same feed. And now, to get right to the point. Episode 10 was one of my favourite episodes, debunking myths with cryptozoologist Tyler Greenfield, and a lot has changed in the 4 years since that episode. It feels like a lot has changed in the last 6 months, really. My feed is flooded with people finding mermaids, giant creatures from the depths, and for some reason, lots of videos of them getting their barnacles washed off. I don't know why people are into that. With a paragraph of text being all that's needed to make a video believable enough to fool Nana on Facebook. How do any of us hope in stemming the tide of misinformation? I am joined once again by Tyler Greenfield, paleontologist and cryptozoologist whose blog, Incertae Sedis, reveals the truth behind some cryptozoological stories and paleontological mistakes. To pick up where we left off, I just need to check one thing. Could the Meg be out there? I just want to check nothing's changed. Are you sure,
absolutely
though?
Not. Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. It's less likely, if anything.
It's one of the few things, like cryptozoologically, paleontologically, that I can say that I'm 100% certain on. I am absolutely confident it is extinct.
I'm sorry, folks. I know you want it to be true, and that's kind of the problem. That was our thesis on the last interview, is it doesn't matter how much evidence you can produce if somebody wants it to be true. And it's hard to prove a negative.
Yeah, you can prove a negative, but a lot of people think you can't. And then a lot of people will let their personal feelings override any sort of logic or facts just because they want it to be true.
And only because of that real human obsession with the biggest, the tallest, the deepest, the most ferocious. If we found something bigger, then that would be, oh, maybe that's hiding in the trenches. Like, it's obviously based on wish fulfillment rather than logic then.
Yeah, I guarantee you, if we ever found a shark that was predatory and bigger than the megalodon, it would start to become the subject of cryptozoological speculations. He would say, well, maybe the Meg's not out there, but this new big one, now that's a promising candidate.
You've got to have scale creep. You've got to sort of outdo it each time.
Exactly.
I was lucky enough to watch the Meg 2 on a research vessel with a load of marine biologists, and just, the frothing.
I didn't like it as much as the first one. The first one was a lot of fun.
I took a lot of screen grabs of their interface because that's quite close to what we do. And I just love the idea of like everything's hexagons and has just unexplored flashing on it. That's how I see the world now. So the rules of the game have changed since we last chatted. Our work's cut out for us. And it's a double-edged sword as well, because then when we publish something that is truly remarkable and real, it's pretty much guaranteed in the comments now we get, oh, this is just AI. Or nothing can live down there. This is just AI.
I see that all the time. Even like on videos that are like 10, 20 years old, that have been known. And I'm talking specifically like cryptozoological videos, like Bigfoot, sea monsters, that kind of thing. Videos that have been around for decades and people have known about. You'll always get comments if you're reposting those videos. Oh, it looks like AI, it looks like CGI, even though it's way before any of that. So everybody is becoming more cautious, but also less cautious. They're quicker to say AI, but they're also less quick to actually catch it when it is AI.
It's something we've seen coming over the last few years, but this like post-truth world where just confidence in anything has been eroded. How have you been managing to like stay hopeful, stay fighting the good fight?
I mean, I guess with some historical knowledge, at the core of it, nothing has really changed. Fake news has always been around. People have always been making up stories and trying to sell things that are not real as being real, and people have fallen for it. Mass hysteria, that kind of thing. So this kind of thing has always existed. It's just that AI makes it quicker and easier to make. It's the quantity of the material that is the problem, not necessarily the content itself, because it still can be disproven. There's still lots of flaws in the AI that you can pick out. So it's doable, but it's a ever increasing tide. The number of AI things increases with every passing month. So things have changed, but things also stay the same.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm getting a bit too disheartened. We had the crazy taxidermy back in the Victorian era with was it Fiji mermaid?
Yeah.
Fish and a monkey.
Barnum's Fiji mermaid. Well, that's the thing about a little side tangent here, but the Fiji mermaid, the one that Barnum had, was actually not even a monkey. It was a plaster sculpture of a monkey with some possible like animal bones mixed in with it. The fish was a real fish, but it wasn't even an actual fish and a monkey. It was a fish and a sculpture of a monkey, which makes it even worse, I guess.
So maybe we've actually gotten better at spotting things. And the same frustration was back then, because then when the first platypus was presented to the world, everyone was just like, oh no, I've seen this. That's just a load of animals glued together.
Yeah, it's a beaver and a duck stitched together. No, it's actually a real animal.
Oh, okay, that makes me more hopeful that we're just in a transitional period, that this has always been part of human nature. Some new tech has come along and it's going to trick people for a little while, and then we'll hopefully right the ship.
Yeah, just recently there was a prominent AI hoax sort of related to cryptozoology and paleontology. Back in April, I think it was, a living coelacanth has been discovered off the coast of California.
Yes.
What? That's like the greatest zoological discovery of the century. But alarm bells were already starting to ring in my head. Why California? That's not a particularly likely area for a coelacanth to show up. It's not the right habitat. You don't get like the underwater caves and rocky overhangs that they like. It's a well-studied area. There are tons of, submersible crews, ROVs, remotely operated cameras of other types, divers, surfers, swimmers, people of all sorts that are frequenting the ocean in that area. How would it remain undetected for so long? So that already didn't make sense to me. So I'm going through all the people's posts, reposting this stuff, but a lot of times they don't repost the original links. So eventually I get to the original link, click on it, and the website is a total farce. It's not a real news site. It's a blogging website called Animals Around the Globe. I've never heard of it before. And from quickly reading through the article, it is so obvious it is AI generated. It's got that classic stilted, vague text where it's clearly like trying to figure out how to say something, but never actually says anything that means anything. But the big problem with this one is that it actually drugged two real institutes into the mix, because this article was claiming that an ROV sent out into a submarine canyon off the coast of California by the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Scripps Institution was the thing that had discovered this coelacanth. And they even said that Scripps and Monterey Bay had put together like a museum exhibition with photographs and video of it. And of course, that's not true at all. I reached out to both institutions. I didn't get a response from Monterey Bay, but Scripps actually did respond to me and they said, yes, this is not true. It never happened. So that's really a big problem. Not only when you create something that at first feels real and that will fool a lot of people, but also something that is now dragging real institutions into the mix and lying about them because they have a scientific reputation to protect.
Yeah.
They should not be involved in this kind of hoax. But fortunately, it blew over very quickly.
It could be malicious and sort of trying to gain credibility, but I also feel like it sounds like the whole article was AI generated and it was just pulling from believable sources and emulating those. And so it sounds like it had very little human input at all.
Yeah, my speculation is that it had pulled from a discovery a couple years ago off the coast of California, not of a coelacanth, but I think it was of some mollusk or like smaller animal that was called like a living fossil. And I think it sort of, picked up with the association between living fossils and coelacanth and then put together this article out of that. This website, Animals Around the Globe, it hasn't stopped. They keep putting out AI-generated articles. There was another one about a woolly rhinoceros mummy that was supposedly discovered in Alaska. Woolly rhinoceroses are only known from Eurasia, Northern Europe, and Northern Asia. So this would be a huge discovery, right? But it's another AI-generated article. And again, they've drug real institutions into it. They said that this was a discovery made, I think, by the University of Fairbanks, Alaska. And of course, that's not true. And this was fooling people again, making the rounds. So this whole website seems to have a problem with this. And then the worst fact about it was that it wasn't just this one blogging website. They were getting picked up by MSN, which is Microsoft's news sort of outlet. For whatever reason, Microsoft has a partnership with this random blogging website and promotes all their articles. So that really helps spread it. So that kind of thing is getting to be a problem.
You're talking about the sort of circular language as well. The amount of time someone's on a page, the amount they read. To be fair, writing has often been this way where you don't want to give it all away in the headline, but you have to read a long, long way, desperate for substance, and realize it never really comes.
AI is very repetitive in its language. Very vague, but very repetitive. And if you know anything about how language influences people, when something is repeated more and more and more, people are more likely to believe it, even if it's not true.
Yeah.
I think that's a particularly insidious facet of AI and its writing style, is that it just hammers you over the head, repeating the same facts over and over again. And that makes it seem more believable to most people. with that repetition.
We'll touch on maybe some other aspects of it, but I think the important foundation thing to get in is a lot of these things that people are using are language models. And it's really important to keep focused on what it is trained on and what it is for, which is formulating believable human language. And I'm seeing a lot of friends like really over rely on it in scientific publishing. You know, it's spitting out really believable citations, which are they're real authors. It's maybe even a real title, but it's a chimera of multiple papers stuck together. And even like I was trying to do some building in the garden and someone said, you know, oh, just use AI to generate the design. And it's a language model, so it produced a really believable design of the tools I'd need and the lengths of everything, but they didn't marry up. It was 4 different tree houses that had been cobbled together, and if you tried to join it up, it didn't match. It looked the part. It looked like it was human language, because that's all it's trying to do. It's not figuring things out. It's just sticking bits together.
It's a language model and it's an aesthetic model. It is not an information or truth model. People would do well to remember that. It is not giving you the truth. It is just predicting what is most likely to be said from the language that it is analyzed. It's just a predicted algorithm.
Because it's such a magic box, I think. If there's any take home, it's that. It is trying to write believably, but not accurately. How can we equip our listeners, because they are getting better and better? What do you look out for in an image or any other output, really, to figure out if it's been AI generated?
Anatomy is a big one, especially when you're dealing with animals. You know, does it have the right number of eyes, the right number of legs, the right number of fins? Does it have the right color? Is the texture like too smooth? A lot of AI images are very smooth and almost too perfect. They don't have a lot of the rough textures. The lighting is too good, but also oftentimes comes from multiple directions when it shouldn't. Shadows are inconsistent. It's difficult. It's not an easy thing to learn, but once you see enough of it, you will start to notice, even on an intuitive level, that it just does not look right. And then you really have to look at the details to see if it actually matches the real animal. Because I've seen a lot of like AI generated sharks. That's becoming a thing, especially with like megalodon videos. And they almost always have incorrect anatomical details. The wrong number of fins, the wrong number of gill slits, the teeth are totally wrong. Sharks have very distinctive tooth patterns and shapes. AI never gets them right. If you know what to look for, it just becomes a total joke. Because again, it's trying to make something that looks believable, doesn't actually care about any details that are real or anatomically correct. So you do have to really be careful. Look out for the anatomical inconsistencies. Look out for the textural and lighting problems. That's what I would say would be the main giveaways of an AI-generated image, of an animal specifically. Look for inconsistencies, things that don't make sense. But unfortunately, a lot of people won't even think about it. They'll just look at it, see the surface details, and be convinced by it. So you really got to look deeper, pay attention closely.
There's that willingness as well. There's that I would like it to be true. You know, we all have confirmation bias. We all sort of approve of things that align with our understanding of the world a little bit quicker.
Yeah. It's easy even for scientists or like very knowledgeable enthusiasts or amateurs to get fooled by this kind of stuff. You know, if it's this amazing scientific discovery or photograph, and it seems at first to be anatomically sound, and it sort of lines up with pre-existing knowledge, then it's easy to fall for at first. It's not until you sit back and look at it and say, oh, there's actually a lot about this image and about this backstory, because usually images come with a backstory, which is oftentimes AI generated as well. But then you start to notice inconsistencies, things that don't make sense. You just got to take the time to look at it and think about it.
One of our listeners pointed out that suction cups on cephalopods are like the fingers. If they're not just on the underside, if they're sort of all over the place in places that you couldn't even grab anything with, that's a good one to look out for with anything tentacly, if the suction cups are over too much of the tentacles and arms.
Or have like the wrong number of rows. Like if it's an octopus, usually they have like 1 to 2 rows of suckers. But, you know, there'll be this AI-generated monstrosity of an octopus, and it'll have a dozen rows of suckers on its arms.
It really likes repeating patterns.
Yes, it does.
Can I share a link with you, and I'll put this in the show notes?
Oh man, that's a terrible image.
It's awful, isn't it?
It's not even close.
But the press release is that we've seen it for the first time. The whole point of the press release is, here is a really high quality image of this animal we've never seen alive, and they stick that on it. It doesn't even have a front.
Wasn't this one filmed by Monterey Bay or one of the other institutions? I think they publicly released their images for...
Yeah, it's Smith Ocean. I was on it. I know what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, if the images are free to use, just use the real photographs. It's almost like people are starting to expect AI generated images to be in articles like this.
It's really good for generating an image for your story because it'll be nicely compositioned, and most importantly, it'll be, at least right now, free for credit. And so even legitimate stories I'm seeing behind an AI generated banner. And if that's a bit of a cartoon and a bit of an infographic, not so bad. But if it's sort of misleading, especially with new species discoveries, like there's always an image of the organism, but then a over the top mysterious looking image is used as the clickbait to get you to look at it. It's a new brittle star, but it's always under the heading of like snake armed deep sea organism found for the first time. And it's like, it's a new brittle star and it's cute and it's pink.
I'm starting to see this with paleontological discoveries too, where they'll even have a press packet with artwork that is accurate to the animal. They'll instead use an AI generated image that looks nothing like the actual animal. So it's a problem that is growing in pretty much every scientific field when it comes to the press side of things.
It's certainly a tool that I'm dabbling in and trying to bear in mind what it is doing and what its limitations are. For generating a podcast graphic, it's so unbelievably easy, and it would be so easy to fall into that trap. We did AI generate one for eDNA just because it's difficult to show that. And I really wanted like Mr. DNA.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I wanted him in a scuba kit. But for spitballing and sort of designing logos and things like that, you can sort of tweak a lot of things. But I would hope then we could get an artist to do it properly. It's just more about storyboarding and throwing things around.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using it for that kind of purpose, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just for preliminary, yeah, like you said, storyboarding kind of things, just getting ideas together. I think, though, when you do have a final version, it's best to get a real photograph or get an actual artist to do something for you.
We'll see through all this and it'll start to look tacky, and then we'll go back to having artists and something a bit more human curated.
Yeah, I think it'll happen eventually. The bubble's got to pop sometime.
Usually I keep my feeds fairly locked down, but I've noticed the YouTube homepage seems particularly bad for this. Like there was multiple little shorts, and one of them was like a Royal Navy officer like wrestling with this savage looking mermaid. And for some reason, loads of people like videos of large marine life having the barnacles washed off.
Yes. I have seen many of those of varying degrees of realisticness. Some are close. Others are pretty outlandish and not very convincing. But they have become popular. I think they trace their lineage back to an earlier kind of video. The turtle with barnacles glued to its back. A lot of times they're like sort of pet turtles, like tortoises.
So not even marine.
Every once in a while, there will be a marine turtle, which is especially concerning. Then they'll scrape them off, which is terrible. Turtles have a very sensitive keratin covering, filled with blood vessels over the top of their shell. But I think this sort of like scrubbing the barnacles off the whales, AI generated videos probably can be traced back to those kinds of videos.
I think it was a convergence of a few things. So there was also the tour guide who got quite a lot of criticism because they were taking the barnacles off the chins of grey whales.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the whales did appear to be sort of coming in and almost asking for this, but it did leave an open wound. And I think also it's that Dr. Pimple Popper kind of thing, like that.
Yes,
we've got that kind of grossness.
Yeah,
we just like, oh, that must feel so much better. And we get this sort of weird associated
satisfaction, like relief with it. There's like an anthropomorphic factor to that.
Yeah, I bet that feels so much better to have that taken off. Is there any other areas you'd like to cover? Because this is just so huge. I feel so saturated by it.
I mean, yeah, AI content is definitely getting bad in like cryptozoological related topics. I'd say more so than other fields. A lot of AI, Bigfoot. If you're on any Bigfoot groups anywhere, which I am, because I love that stuff, even though I'm not a believer. The AI images are increasing all the time. You get a lot of people who are calling them out, but a lot of people are like, wow, this is the greatest footage ever. And it's clearly an AI image. It doesn't really have any anatomical fidelity. It's blurry and misshapen, but it's enough to fool people because it looks enough like a real photo. It's got just enough of the texture and lighting, even if it's not quite right. So it's becoming a bigger problem in the cryptid world, even than like the zoological or paleontological world. I also think zoologists and paleontologists are better equipped generally to handle that kind of thing. They're more skeptical, more cautious. That's not to say they're perfect and they still fall for it, but they're better equipped than most cryptozoologists are. It's just the fact that a lot of cryptozoologists don't have the background knowledge, are more willing to accept evidence that supports their worldview. Even if they take a more skeptical or scientific approach, there's still more of a confirmation bias there, more of a willingness to accept than, I guess, what you call mainstream scientists. I don't really like the term mainstream because there are a lot of mainstream scientists who do cryptozoology. Sometimes they say they do, sometimes they don't, but they still do it anyway. Scientists who have more of a critical or skeptical background are generally better equipped to handle it than most cryptozoologists.
I saw a YouTube ad the other day. I'm going into some crunchier areas for some research I'm doing right now, and I actually like the basis of the stuff I'm looking at, but it's interesting the adverts that come along with it. And I got forced an ad talking about how I could cure tinnitus with baking soda, basically.
Yeah, there's all sorts of these fake, like, cure-all type ads, and they're usually AI generated. They're usually like videos of real people talking about something else, and then they've AI'd over their mouths to match the words.
Oh, that was because it had an uncanny valley thing.
They're even like a still image that they've moved with AI. There's a lot of really tricky, nasty deceptions that these fake medical ads use.
This was really slick. It was a very believable AI avatar, and it was a very nice voice, very well spoken. Obviously, to keep me on the ad, it did that real circular language thing where every time it went round, it felt like it was about to tell you the thing, and then it went round again, and it was about to tell you something important, and it went round again. And there's this sort of classic, like, a neurobiologist has published research that showed that, wait, no, you don't get to say that. Who? Where can I read it? You can't just say it. You have to back it up.
Stick around till the end of this hour or 2 hour long video to find out my real secret. But the rest of the time, I'm just going to talk at you about nonsense. And then at the end of the video, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
They never reveal what the secret is.
Yeah, I think it was entirely AI generated, both the language and the person it was horrifying, if I'm honest. I was upset for the rest of the day.
But I guess we could talk about some of my recent research and my consultancy work if you want to. For my master's research that I'm finishing up, I've actually done it on Megalodon. Big surprise. So last time I was on, I talked a bit about how there is actually skeletal material known from Megalodon and its relatives. Well, there's this very exceptionally preserved specimen that came from Belgium. It's a vertebral column that has 141 vertebrae preserved. We think that most of it is part of the precaudal column, which means the part of the vertebral column before the tail fin. We think it's mostly complete. It's maybe missing a few, and it may include a few of the caudal vertebrae, but it is a very fantastic specimen, the most complete that we know of Megalodon. But of course, it's still missing the tail, right? We don't know the exact count for the number of its caudal vertebrae. That's what my research is focused on for my master's thesis. It's actually estimating the total count, the precaudal plus the caudal vertebrae. So I've done this by taking data from modern lamniforms, and it's an order of sharks that are commonly known as the mackerel sharks. They're Megalodon's closest relatives. Megalodon itself is a lamniform, so it's part of that group. So I've gathered all this data from the literature on living lamniforms. It's been a lot of work. I've spent over 2 years just gathering references. So I've managed to get together about 70 specimens from Megalodon's living relatives, looking at their precaudal counts, and then the relationship between the precaudal counts and the number of total counts. And it turns out the relationship between those two things is actually consistent. So I've come up with this mathematical equation. You can actually predict the number of total vertebrae from the precaudal vertebrae. So if we use the number of 141 precaudal vertebrae for Megalodon, I have now been able to estimate that Megalodon would have approximately 230 vertebrae. And this tells us quite a bit about it. This count is higher than most other lamniforms. So then I have to come up with ideas on how to explain why does it really have such a high count. Unfortunately, I've hit dead ends in answering that question. So I looked at two main hypotheses. One is that it had a high vertebral count because it had a more slender body form. This has been suggested in some recent papers that Megalodon may have been skinnier than previously thought, had more of an elongate body form because of how big it was. But I found that there was not any relationship between body slenderness and the vertebral count in the modern lamniforms. So that can't really be used as an explanation. Then I also tested if just overall body size, the large length of Megalodon being the largest lamniform, if that could possibly explain the high vertebral count. I could not find a relationship between the maximum length and the total vertebral count in modern lamniforms either. So we know that Megalodon now had this high vertebral count, I don't know how to explain it yet. I've been able to rule out 2 of the pre-existing hypotheses, but I still need to be doing some more work. And that'll probably be my doctoral and later beyond that. I'll probably spend my whole career trying to figure that out. One thing before we go, I should give you a bit of an update on some of the stuff I talked about last time. We talked about the megalodon and cryptozoology.
Oh, yes, please.
I have actually published some of my research on that. So in 2023, I finally got my budding year and finished it. I've been working on it since 2019, and I published this big, long paper. It's like 20 pages long. Half of that is references. There are like 150, 160 references and then like 8,000 words of text or something. It's the longest thing I've ever written by far. It's basically a monograph on the history of megalodon and cryptozoology. Still pretty proud of it. It's my magnum opus so far. So if you're interested in a more in-depth exploration, megalodon and cryptozoology, the major sightings that are promoted by people, the history of those, an attempt at a reasonable explanation for all of them, tons of references to the primary cryptozoological literature, but also the modern zoological and paleontological literature. I am already working on an addendum to that, though. I have already collected enough material to publish like a proper update on that. Got more sightings to talk about, more details that I didn't have last time that I need to update. I've discovered like some things in the original that I talked about are actually like hoaxes. They're plagiarized from earlier sources. I found more primary accounts to add details to the originals. I've got a lot of material that I need to get working on to get that addendum up. So hopefully I will also have that soon. I've also published some other research about megalodon and the history of paleontology in general. I've talked about this specimen that I've nicknamed Mitchell's monster. It was first published by a naturalist named Samuel Latham Mitchell in the early 1800s. It doesn't have a specimen number. The museum it was at was destroyed in a fire, unfortunately. So we only have the historical literature to go off of. And from these accounts, I've worked together that it was probably megalodon teeth associated with the whale skeleton. The first ever discovery of that kind of thing. So it is an important historical thing. But I've done all sorts of research on that, reconstructing the story on that, and it does intersect with cryptozoology. It's really interesting because it plays into the megalodon stuff, even though it was not initially identified as a megalodon. This skeleton was discovered in North Carolina, I think. It's one of the Carolinas in around 1816. On a plantation, they're digging for some kind of purpose. They unearth this skeleton. It's a vertebral column, and then it's got teeth with it. They don't know what it is. There's speculation that it's a giant shark, which is fairly correct. But there's also this idea that it could be a sea serpent, because that's a hot topic in the 1810s in America. There's sightings of like the Gloucester sea serpent in Massachusetts, which are nationwide news. It's a huge, huge topic at the time. There are a lot of major people taking this very, very seriously. So maybe it's a sea serpent. So they send it from the Carolinas up to New York to a guy named Samuel Latham Mitchell. He's an early naturalist. He's a Renaissance man, right? He does a ton of different things like most wealthy people at that time. He's like a senator, congressman of some sort, but he's also involved in all sorts of like natural history studies. He's one of America's first serious paleontologists. He builds up his huge personal collection, one of the first like large scale collections of fossils in the United States. So the specimen is sent to him because he's the guy to send it to, right? He writes up a short description of it in 1818. He keeps the original identifications. Maybe it's a giant shark, maybe it's a sea serpent, but it's this huge vertebral column, like 34 to 36 feet long, with these big, heavy like backbones, like maybe like 12 pounds or more per backbones. They're dense, big bones. And it's got these triangular shaped teeth that are like 6 inches long. Well, what has teeth that are triangular and 6 inches long? Nothing but the megalodon. But the vertebrae are too heavy, right? They're not a megalodon. The vertebral column is probably from a whale, right? So they found this association of megalodon teeth and vertebrae from a whale. Unfortunately, the specimen is donated in 1826 to a museum called the Lyceum of Natural History in New York City. This is one of the first natural history museums in the United States. Latham is one of its first presidents. He's like a founding member. So he donates his fossil and like rock collection to them. So they store it over a period of many years, but they run into all sorts of financial troubles. They move buildings like once every 5 to 10 years. Everything is left in storage. Then in 1866, their latest building burns down. Their entire collection that they've been gathering for the past 50 or 60 years, the largest natural history collection in the United States and in North America at that time, gone in a single night in a fire. And that includes Mitchell's monster, this amazing megalodon and whale specimen. So we only have the historical accounts to base it off of. So that was my job, reconstructing that story, because it had never been put together before. Mitchell's original description had been mentioned once or twice in the literature, and even like in a recent blog post by a paleontologist. But nobody had ever put together all the historical material. Oh, I should specify, he only had a single vertebrae and 2 of the teeth. The whole thing wasn't sent, just part, but he still described it based on like the oral accounts he received. So all people knew was that it was sent to him, and then there was nothing from there. Well, I found the donation catalog to the Lyceum that he wrote because it was his collection. But then I also had to figure out when and where it was exactly collected. Mitchell did not give like a precise date or time frame, and he gives inconsistent details on who even found it. So I actually had to look through old newspaper accounts, and these are some of the oldest possible ones that are currently digitized, right? These are newspaper accounts from like 1818, 1817, 1816. And I did find a newspaper notice from 1816 of him receiving the specimen and actually teaching with it. Because he did teach a class, like a natural history anatomy class at a local college. And there was a notice in a local New York newspaper about it in 1816 that he had had that specimen by that time and had been teaching with it. So that's how I was able to put more of a date on what it would have been found, 1816 or maybe like a year or two earlier. But then, even though it had not been initially identified as a megalodon, it had been identified as a giant shark or a sea serpent, it had actually been connected with sightings of giant sharks in the 1830s. And there's two different sightings, but they're both in Southeast Asia, and they both probably represent whale sharks, described as being this large, like square-headed shark with sort of that like spotted pattern. Probably a whale shark. That's what has been accepted as the explanation. But there are speculations that it's some sort of prehistoric monster. There's one sighting in, I think, like 1834 and another in 1835. The guy in the 1834 sighting says, maybe it's a plesiosaurus. Okay, probably not. That's way off. But the second guy says, what if it's a giant shark? So he had actually heard about Mitchell's monster. He had gotten another, like a secondhand account about it. And he said, what if this sighting that I had of this big shark is the same animal that Mitchell described? What if it's this big prehistoric shark? That's crazy, right? It's the 1830s, and people are already starting to speculate about giant prehistoric sharks only known from fossils as being still alive and being sighted by people. But this is like the origin point for the whole megalodon thing, right? People have been talking about this idea since the 1830s. You know, and unfortunately, I run into it a lot of times where people are too dismissive of the megalodon stuff. Skeptical scientists who maybe know a lot about sharks but don't know a lot about the history of the whole megalodon thing are too quick to dismiss it. They say, well, it's just a recent phenomenon, right? There's not really anything to it. There's not really any sightings. There's not really any literature. Well, no, there's actually a whole ton of literature. It's an old, very complicated idea. It didn't start off really as anything big. It snowballed over time, but there's a lot of twists and turns, a lot of branches on the tree that some go places, some don't. It's a really complex, really old idea that has a lot of cultural sticking power. It's not sufficient to debunk it by just saying, well, it's a recent thing. You know, the Meg movies made it up or the documentary made it up. It's not like important. We shouldn't spend time on it. You got to understand the whole history behind it. And that's why I've been working on publishing these papers and doing all this research. I've still got so much more work to do on it.
That's what I've always loved about your research and why I find it fascinating is even though you are saying that this is something untrue, you are researching and uncovering that untruth and its origins, which is far more informative than, oh, this is just a recent phenomenon.
If you want to be a good skeptical cryptozoologist, you have to be a historian. And that's, I mean, the same goes for any field. You should be at least a confident historian of your field. It helps a lot, even in doing your modern studies. But in cryptozoology, it's an absolute necessity to do good scholarship. Because these ideas, I mean, and megalodon is like this tiny, tiny part of cryptozoology. And cryptozoology itself is sometimes considered like a subculture, considered a fringe thing. So it's a small part of a small thing, but it's actually way more complex than you think. And it's like being a deep sea fisherman. To bring it back around to the deep sea, it's like trawling the ocean bottom, the depths of obscurity, and bringing up some new, weird, totally unheard of fish. Every time you do research, it's something new.
We will include in the show notes, hopefully almost everything you've spoken about. Thanks so much, Tyler. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I had fun.
I don't know if you've come across any particularly egregious AI stuff.
It's not necessarily AI stuff, but there was, I think we've talked about this before, but the goblin shark, right? It's only ever been filmed twice. The first time, I think the Japanese trawled a couple and they managed to get them into a harbour. So they had put a diver in, right? And that's where those images of using the snout jaw thing came from. And so, yes, they were found alive, but not necessarily in a natural setting.
And that red fish it's eating is clearly dead. It's clearly been given that.
Yes. And so actually just encountering one in the wild was actually us this time last year. And there's a piece of footage, it's about, I don't know, 10 seconds long. It's not great, but it's certainly a goblin shark. And so, you know how when goblin sharks die, their jaw comes out and everyone knows what they look like when they're relaxed, but in real life, they're just big, sharks. But
it's like the
if
blobfish.
You go online and say, give me a picture of a goblin shark, half of them are obviously just dead samples, which makes sense because most of the specimens, most of the records of this thing have come from washing up on a beach or bycatch or whatever it may be. But it's just completely flooded with AI generated or just art or interpretations of these things. And so that's what makes it really difficult when you're trying to get a proper idea on this. It's like, you're trying to find a legitimately good, scientifically accurate picture or drawing or schematic of this animal was really hard because of the volume of rubbish you have to punch through to get to it. And that's the only time I've ever been sort of genuinely frustrated by the fluff on the internet.
Some people were trying to sort of quantify that because Google image searches, like somebody was actually going through and then highlighting the images that were real. And as more and more of this content is getting generated, it becomes this feedback loop. So actually your Google image results are getting less and less accurate because the proportions are changing. I think there's a little bit of something in Google image searches where it sort of evaluates the quality of the image. And because AI generated images are beautifully lit and really high resolution and really in focus because they're not real, they get sort of bumped to the top. Example I saw was for baby peacock, and there's loads of AI generated images of what we would assume a baby peacock looks like. But of course, that whole plumage thing is a sexual advertisement, and they don't have any of that when they're juveniles. They're just little brown birds. So the amount of images of baby peacock, which looks like a peacock with the big fan tail and the beautiful blue, we know those aren't real, but it's the majority of hits on Google Images.
It's a tough world we live in, Tom.
Tyler was a bit more optimistic. We've kind of been through this before. And when the new tech comes out, we fall for it for a little while, but then we sort of learn to see through it. I'm hoping it'll self-right again and we haven't finally invented something so convincing that we can't adapt to it. But I feel like that's already happening as well. They're like, I can recognize the style of language when one of these tools has been used and that sort of cartoony style they do. Because I enjoyed making some images when it first came out, but now they all start to feel the same. There's something about it, there's some uncanny valley thing where they still look like really good images, but they all feel the same. That makes sense. And I feel like I'm starting to see through it.
I think what it is you lack all the subtle, almost subconscious imperfections.
Yeah.
Of a real photograph, right? Real photographs are never really perfect. It's that, the uncanny valley things, like it's almost too real. It's too perfect.
Yeah.
People don't look like that.
It would have a bit of mud on it. It would have a scar. It would have a torn feather. But these like weird, dreamlike, perfect images, doesn't feel right.
Is it time we just did a Control-Delete on the entire internet? Start again?
Might be time for a do-over. We've learned our lessons. We'll get it right next time. And that was a pressurized version of one of our longer podcast episodes. If you enjoyed that and you would like to hear the full-length episode, just match the episode numbers and you'll be able to find the full-length version in the feed. Thanks for listening. We'll deep see you next time, and I abyss you already.